Pete Hegseth should resign. That's a direct quote from a statement issued by a coalition of House Democrats. They're joining a growing chorus on Capitol Hill calling for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to quit after two major incidents with his direct involvement have plunged the Pentagon into chaos. A new Defense Department Inspector General report confirmed what many suspected all along, that Pete Hegseth endangered the lives of U.S. service members by communicating about sensitive military intelligence in a Signal group chat, which led to calls for his resignation. Pete Hegseth is also facing calls to resign as chilling new details emerged about this deadly strike carried out on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat by the United States on September 2nd that experts say could be a war crime. The New York Times is reporting, quote, multiple people who've seen the video of the attack say the survivors climbed on the overturned hull of the boat and waved to something overhead, a gesture interpreted as an attempt to surrender, beckoning rescue, or trying to signal other alleged drug traffickers. Pete Hegseth's Defense Department has so far refused to show the American people the video of what happened during the attacks. Hegseth first said he watched the whole thing happen and that they knew who was on the boat. Then he changed his story, blaming, quote, the fog of war for the second strike, which killed two people on that September 2nd operation, which would be interesting, except for the fact that we're not at war and alleged drug dealers are not war combatants. A group of bipartisan lawmakers, which included the top Democrats and Republicans from the House Intelligence and Armed Services Committees in both the House and the Senate, were shown video of the boat strike behind closed doors.
All right, folks. We need to talk about the growing chorus on Capitol Hill calling for Pete Hegseth to resign as defense secretary, because this isn't just coming from progressive Democrats anymore. This is a coalition of House Democrats, including the entire New Democrat coalition, a center-left caucus made up of 115 members, joining with others to say enough is enough. Pete Hegseth should resign. That's a direct quote from their statement, and it comes after two major incidents with his direct involvement have plunged the Pentagon into absolute chaos. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. First, there's the new Defense Department Inspector General report that confirmed what many suspected all along, that Pete Hegseth endangered the lives of U.S. service members by communicating about sensitive military intelligence in a Signal group chat. This isn't some minor procedural violation. This is the Secretary of Defense putting American troops at risk because he couldn't be bothered to follow basic security protocols. That alone would be grounds for resignation in any normal administration. But second, and even more serious, Hegseth is facing calls to resign as chilling new details have emerged about the deadly strike carried out on an alleged Venezuelan drug boat by the United States on September 2nd. Experts are saying this could constitute a war crime. The New York Times is reporting that multiple people who've seen the video of the attack say the survivors climbed onto the overturned hull of the boat and waved to something overhead. This gesture has been interpreted as an attempt to surrender, to beckon rescue, or possibly to signal other alleged drug traffickers. Pete Hegseth's Defense Department has so far refused to show the American people the video of what happened during these attacks, and the story keeps changing in ways that suggest a cover-up. Hegseth first said he watched the whole thing happen and that they knew who was on the boat. Then he changed his story, blaming the fog of war for the second strike, which killed two people during that September 2nd operation, which would be interesting except for one crucial fact. We're not at war, and alleged drug dealers are not war combatants. There is no fog of war when you're not in a war zone. A group of bipartisan lawmakers, including the top Democrats and Republicans from the House Intelligence and Armed Services Committees in both chambers, were shown video of the boat strike behind closed doors yesterday. Also in those briefings was Navy Admiral Frank Bradley, the Special Operations Commander who oversaw the operation under Hegseth's command. After those briefings, the Democrats who saw that video expressed absolute shock at what they witnessed. Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, made several critical points. First, there was no fog of war. They had a clear vision of these two people on top of what was left of their capsized boat for quite a while, somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour after the initial strike. Second, he directly refuted Senator Tom Cotton's absurd claim that the two people were trying to turn their boat back over. Smith says that's patently ridiculous. That boat wasn't going anywhere. Congressman Jim Himes, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, described what he saw in stark terms. There were two individuals clinging to flotsam. That's what there was. There wasn't weaponry of any kind. There wasn't a radio. There was no means for them to communicate other than the fact that the fire and the smoke was fairly well visible for a long distance around, but there was no radio. There's just no way to get away from the fact that the United States killed two individuals who were shipwrecked and in massive distress. Another lawmaker stated clearly, "There was no doubt about the fact that I believe they were incapacitated." These aren't Republicans trying to score political points. These are members of Congress from both parties who were shown classified video evidence and came away deeply troubled by what they saw. They're calling for public hearings where Secretary Hegseth comes before their committees and the American people to explain what he's doing and justify it, because based on what they saw, it's not justifiable. Senator Mark Warner, vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, put it bluntly, "We have a pattern from Pete Hegseth that is just not acceptable. This is an individual who is way beyond his capabilities. He should have never been confirmed. I've called for his firing or dismissal since the spring. Nothing has changed in my estimation of his lack of capability." It's crucial to remember that this boat strike we're talking about is just one of 22 boat strikes that have happened this year under Trump's Defense Department, carried out under Pete Hegseth's command. Hegseth has a deadly serious job with life and death consequences. Those 22 strikes have led to at least 86 deaths. 86 people are dead because the Trump administration says those people were smuggling drugs on board these boats. Here's the problem. We don't know if that's true. When you blow up a boat and destroy all the evidence, who knows what was actually on board? Trump's Defense Department under Hegseth has not provided any evidence whatsoever to prove that any of these 86 people were actually smuggling drugs. Nothing. No paper trail, no photographic proof, nothing at all. They just release videos of exploding boats and say, "Take our word for it." That's not how a professional military operates. That's not how a country committed to the rule of law operates. The New Democrat Coalition's statement doesn't mince words. Time and again, the secretary has lied, dodged, deflected, and shockingly scapegoated his subordinates. He is a disgrace to the office he holds and should resign immediately before his actions cost American lives. Congressman John Garamendi from California, a member of the House Armed Services Committee, makes the critical point that this isn't actually the fog of war. It's the fog of intelligence at the Department of Defense. Hegseth is nowhere near qualified to head up this department, the most important department in the federal government, obviously the biggest, the most expensive, and the one with the greatest consequences. He has to go. He never should have been nominated, let alone confirmed by the Senate. Garamendi points out that we've been dealing with drug boats for a long, long time. It's the Coast Guard's responsibility. Sometimes the Navy assists by stopping the boats, then the Coast Guard goes aboard, seizes any drugs they find, arrests the people on the boat, and questions them. We get information. There are tons of drugs captured by the Coast Guard through proper law enforcement procedures. But that's not what's happening here with these strikes. This is, in Garamendi's words, flat-out murder. There are calls for public hearings, but Garamendi raises an important concern about whether hearings actually mean anything anymore. We've seen Kristi Noem, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel at hearings performing for an audience of one, Donald Trump, and not actually answering questions from senators or members of Congress. So how do you conduct a meaningful hearing when witnesses just stonewall and lie? Garamendi's answer is crucial. You can't depend on the adversarial witness to provide the information. You have to do the investigations first. You bring in lower-level participants under oath to talk about their roles. You make sure you know more than the key witnesses before they testify. Then you put the key witnesses in a box. You have all that information already on the record, and you ask them, is this what happened? Let them try to dance around it, but they're dancing in a very difficult situation where their lies can be directly contradicted by evidence already established. So, yes, we need public hearings, but those hearings need to potentially take 3 or 4 days to lay the foundation with other witnesses before bringing in Hegseth and the other principals. The public needs to see those tapes. The public needs to understand the intelligence, at least how the boats were identified as belonging to narco-terrorists. Do all the legwork, establish the facts through multiple witnesses under oath, and then confront the defense secretary with what those witnesses said. But Garamendi raises the fundamental question that cuts to the heart of this. Is this a war? For what purpose? And critically, did Congress authorize the use of force? The answer is no. Congress has not authorized war powers for operations in the Caribbean or against Venezuela. This is an administration running away with the power of Congress to appropriate money and declare war. Garamendi says Democrats must use the upcoming budget extension at the end of January as leverage, not only to deal with the healthcare issue, but also to rein in a president who's exceeding his constitutional authority. Congress has to say, sorry, Mr. President, you do not have any authority to wage war in Venezuela or whatever other place you want to go. We have that power under the Constitution. It's going to be messy, and the question is whether Republicans will stand with Democrats on this principle. You may have legitimate concerns about Venezuela and drug trafficking, but this is not the way we do things. This is not how a constitutional republic operates. This is not how a professional military bound by the laws of war operates. This is not how a country that claims to respect human rights and the rule of law operates. The coalition calling for Hegseth's resignation is growing because the evidence of his incompetence and potential criminality keeps mounting. Signalgate put American troops at risk. The boat strikes may constitute war crimes. The stories keep changing. The video evidence is being hidden from the American people. Lower-level officials are being scapegoated. And through it all, Hegseth shows no understanding of the legal and ethical constraints that are supposed to govern military operations. This isn't about politics. This isn't about Democrats trying to undermine Trump's defense secretary. This is about members of Congress from both parties who have seen classified evidence and concluded that what's happening is deeply wrong, potentially illegal, and absolutely disqualifying for someone holding one of the most important positions in government. When bipartisan lawmakers come out of classified briefings saying they've seen one of the most troubling things in their time in public service, that should alarm every American regardless of political affiliation. Pete Hegseth should resign. If he won't resign, Trump should fire him. And if Trump won't fire him, Congress needs to use every tool at their disposal, hearings, appropriations power, oversight authority, to hold both Hegseth and the administration accountable. Because what we're watching is the systematic dismantling of the guardrails that prevent war crimes and protect American service members. And if we don't stop it now, the damage to American credibility, military professionalism, and constitutional governance will take generations to repair.